Imagine, just for a second, that you accidentally put your hand on a red-hot stove. Instantly, in a fraction of a second, your brain is just screaming in agony, and you instinctively yank your hand back. That right there is a pure, visceral, biological reaction, and it's designed entirely to save your life. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into John Cacioppo and William Pittrick's truly groundbreaking research on human nature and our absolute need for social connection. We're going to completely dismantle the idea that loneliness is just some kind of poetic sorrow or sadness. It's actually a hardwired biological warning system.
So think about this. What if a broken heart actually triggered the exact same biological alarm as that burnt hand? I mean, it sounds like a metaphor, right? But neurologically speaking, it's literal. Brain scans have revealed something absolutely astonishing. Both physical pain and social rejection are processed in the exact same part of your brain. It's called the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, meaning from your brain's perspective, there is literally no difference between a broken leg and a broken heart. And why is that? Well, because out in the ancient wilderness, if our ancestors were rejected and cast out of the tribe, they would die. Simple as that. So chronic loneliness is actually your brain sounding a deafening siren, warning you that your survival is in imminent danger.
Now, there's a really critical distinction we need to make here. Let's look at the story of Katie Bishop. Katie grew up in a chaotic, super crowded family, but she always felt completely isolated on the inside. She figured, hey, if I just move to a bustling new city and get my own place, I'll be fine. But when she actually did that, she suffered a massive breakdown, both physically and psychologically. She gained weight, her immune system completely crashed, and she basically spent her days binge eating in front of the TV. Her story highlights that physically being alone is totally different from the mental state of loneliness. In fact, researchers measure this using what's called the UCLA Loneliness Scale. And guess what? It doesn't ask how many friends you have, it asks how often you feel misunderstood. Because you could literally be standing in a stadium surrounded by 100,000 people and still feel like you're completely alone. Section 1, the genetics of social need. Which brings us to a huge question. Are some of us just born to feel more isolated? To figure this out, researchers ran these massive twin studies in the Netherlands to see if our need for social connection has a genetic baseline. And the answer is a resounding yes. A requirement for human connection is literally written into our DNA. I like to think of it as an elastic leash. Your genetics don't lock you into one unchangeable fate. Instead, they give you a baseline range, basically the length of the leash. But it's your environment that determines how tight that leash actually gets. If you're born with a really high genetic need for social connection and your environment just fails to provide it, well, that elastic leash gets pulled incredibly taut. And that tension, that is the physical stress of loneliness, and it immediately starts pumping your body full of fight or flight stress hormones. Section 2, society-threatening behaviors. We usually think of loneliness as this quiet, personal tragedy, right? But remember those fight or flight hormones we just talked about? Well, they actually hijack your brain's operating system. Loneliness doesn't just make us sad, it drives society-threatening behaviors by completely dismantling our ability to self-regulate. Psychologist Roy Baumeister ran experiments showing exactly how this goes down. When we experience social exclusion, all of our brain's energy pivots to scanning the environment for threats. And that totally drains the power right out of our frontal lobes, which is the area responsible for executive control. Without that executive control, our self-regulation just collapses. This is exactly why lonely people often fall into impulsive, really destructive habits, like binge eating, just like Katie Bishop did. Their battery for willpower is simply gone. And that leaves them prone to behaviors that not only harm themselves, but seriously disrupt the society around them. This complete lack of regulation leads to what researchers call the dirty lens. In a really fascinating study out of Ohio State University, researchers actually used hypnosis to induce feelings of loneliness in students. And what they discovered was that loneliness acts exactly like a filthy pair of glasses. Looking through this dirty lens, people start experiencing deep pessimism, sudden outward hostility, and just plummeting self-esteem. But here is the most dangerous part. They suffer major cognitive distortions, to the point where a friendly smile from a stranger is violently misinterpreted as a sneer or a literal threat. You can easily see how this kind of sudden outward hostility directly threatens the social fabric around them. It's a real societal danger. This actually brings us to a very famous philosophical perspective on human nature. You might have heard of the philosopher Thomas Hobbes. He famously claimed that humans are inherently selfish and that life in our natural state is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. And for centuries, this cynical view has been used to justify why humans act destructively, suggesting that deep down we're all just violent competitors at heart. But is that actually true? Let's check the anthropological record. The crucial point here is that Hobbes was just wrong. Anthropologist Marjorie Shostak actually spent time living with the Kong-San hunter-gatherer tribe in Africa, and her findings prove that our survival on the savannah wasn't based on brute force or ruthless competition at all. I mean, we didn't have sharp claws or thick hides, right? We survived through what's known as the third adaptation, which is intense social cooperation, driven by empathy and bonding hormones like oxytocin. We are literally biologically wired to cooperate. But, as we know, social cooperation requires strict maintenance. Every society is going to have cheaters and free riders. To handle this, humans evolved something called altruistic punishment, meaning we're willing to take a personal hit to punish people who break the rules just to maintain order in the group. But here is exactly where the society-threatening impact of loneliness strikes all over again. Lonely individuals, because they're suffering from that impaired self-regulation, totally fail to properly engage in this dynamic. They either become way too passive to actually stand up to rule breakers, or they swing the other way and react with extreme, unregulated hostility. So when a large chunk of a population is isolated, this really delicate evolutionary balance just breaks down, and that puts the entire cooperative structure of society at massive risk. Section 3. The physical toll of loneliness. And the destruction, it isn't just societal. Let's look at the rapid cellular destruction that's happening inside the chronically lonely body. We've just seen how it severely affects our behavior in society, but the physiological damage is honestly just as terrifying. Researchers have pinned down exactly 5 distinct biological pathways through which loneliness literally destroys our physical health. So it's not just a feeling, it is a physiological wrecking ball. Let's walk through these 5 pathways. First up, lonely people naturally fall into poorer health behaviors, like exercising way less. Second, they experience objectively harsher life stress once they hit middle age. Third is that dirty lens popping up again, where they start perceiving normal, everyday events as highly stressful threats. Fourth is a concept called allostasis. Basically, the body gets locked in a perpetual high alert state, which increases peripheral resistance, and that just skyrockets your blood pressure. And the fifth is probably the most shocking: fragmented sleep and altered DNA transcription. Yeah, you heard that right. Loneliness literally changes how your genes express themselves, entirely shutting down your immune system's repair functions at a cellular level. Yet, incredibly, even as the body is breaking down, the brain desperately tries to save us. Have you ever noticed that when someone yawns near you, you just automatically yawn? That's called emotional contagion. In one really wild experiment, participants who were subtly made to feel socially rejected subconsciously started tapping their feet to match the rhythm of the researcher who was tapping their foot across the table. It was pure unconscious mimicry. Their brains were desperately, invisibly trying to rebuild those severed social bonds by basically signaling, hey, look, we're alike, please accept me. Section 4, the antidote of empathy. So, how do we actually fix this? Well, the antidote comes with a massive warning attached. If you know someone who is chronically lonely, the absolute worst thing you can do is just shove them into a crowded party. Functional MRI scans actually show that a lonely person's brain processes social stimuli totally differently. Their reward systems essentially malfunction when looking at happy faces, and they interpret them as threats instead of friendly invitations. So just being physically close to people isn't the cure. The actual cure requires cleaning that dirty lens. The theologian Reinhold Niebuhr popularized a concept called self-transcendence. It essentially means stepping outside your own distorted cycle of fear by serving others, volunteering, helping a neighbor out, contributing to a charity. These acts effectively bypass those broken reward systems. By offering help without expecting any immediate social validation in return, the lonely brain slowly recalibrates itself. The hostility starts to fade, the dirty lens is wiped clean, and our evolutionary social balance is finally restored. Basically, we heal ourselves by helping others. As Robert Putnam highlighted in his really famous work, Bowling Alone, modern hyper-individualism is incredibly costly, both to our health and to our economy. Evolution itself points us to an inescapable conclusion here. The golden rule, treating others as you wish to be treated, it's not just some nice, fluffy moral sentiment. It is a strict evolutionary imperative. It is quite literally the most logical, scientifically sound survival strategy for our species. Harmony between mind, body, and society absolutely demands it. So I want to leave you with a final, somewhat provocative thought. Over millions of years, our brains evolved to require face-to-face interaction, physical touch, and deep social cooperation just to survive. We built an incredibly powerful social immune system based entirely on those realities. So we have to ask ourselves, does digital media bypass our social immunity? In a modern world where we constantly feed ourselves this artificial diet of text messages and heavily curated social media feeds, are we basically short-circuiting that very immune system? If our bodies react to a lack of genuine connection the exact same way they react to physical trauma, what is this digital isolation actually going to do to the evolution of our species? Take that thought with you today, and please, make sure to take care of your real-world connections. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.